The type of attention you get and who you get it from determines where we end up in life.
We got.
This has already been accepted at the University of Texas in Austin, electrical
In a
engineering.
community where the statistics aren't the best, the default isn't the best either.
The gentleman who's going to be on the field representing South San,
Defensive captain of the varsity football team.
Mr. Jesus
Giving
Rendon.
his life to giving back to this community.
St. Joseph's Catholic Church Choir.
So I decided to start a nonprofit called Building a Purpose.
And if we can raise that default to be something of higher standards,
Help students find their purpose in life.
I think we can do something
We need.
special by default.
Welcome to the Jesus Rendon podcast, where we talk about life, purpose, and God. I am extremely excited with our next guest here, the former Congressman Pete Gallegos for District 23, a former state representative, and the former president of Sul Ross State University in Alpine. Representative Gallegos, thank you so much for coming.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you, man. I hadn't seen you in a while.
It's been a little
Yeah.
bit. So, seeing your son, I remember you were always talking about Nicolas.
El rey de mi vida.
And now
Todavía.
he's bigger than all of us.
Yeah, it was, I think, probably, becoming a father was an adjustment, but I think the biggest adjustment that I've had to make with him is that I now have to look up when I look at him. That for me was a little disconcerting, porque although I still will tell him that he's not taller than I am, but everybody else tells us that he's. We actually had a group of people in Eagle Pass one time, and they all agreed that I was taller. So I still kind of rely on that. I kind of rely on that.
Is that propaganda there, Nicolas? That's propaganda. His students. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. No, that's awesome, and it's so I've seen him grow over the years on social media, and to see him, and I also have to look up to him. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a different thing, but it's there's nothing more fun, I think, than parenthood, which I'm sure you're experiencing. I mean, there's nothing more rewarding. There's no work in the world that I think is more important than being a good parent.
Right. And I think when the first time we met, I didn't have any kids then.
Right.
And now we've got 3. Autumn, our oldest, she'll be 7 in a couple weeks, and a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So we have our work cut out for us, certainly. Cool. So what have you been up to these days? I know I went through your at a very high level your resume, but actually let's start with one story I remember from a story you shared.
Sure.
And I know I'm shooting from the hip here. You probably weren't expecting this, but the first time you ever considered running for office, it was for a city council role?
School board. And
you were the youngest ever.
I was. I had just graduated from high school.
Mm-hmm.
When I decided to run
what school district
for
was
the
this?
school board in Alpine. It was the Alpine Independent School District. And, my dad was the first, in those days the word Latino didn't exist, right? We were all Mexican. So he was the first Mexicano on the board in Alpine, and was responsible for the integration of the schools there, a lot of the work that was done on that from the board perspective. So I also had a lot of ideas because I had just gone through school, right? And there was things that I didn't like about how things were done. And I am one of those people that, I was taught you don't complain unless you're willing to do something. No te puedes quejar si no quieres meterte, if you don't want to go in and get something done. So I ran for the school board in Alpine. There were 7 candidates that year. I think the top 2 were elected. I was 3rd, but I was behind by maybe 7 votes, which wasn't a bad showing at all for an 18-year-old kid fresh out of high school. So that was my first. Taste.
First
of it.
run at it.
Yeah. It was a good. I've learned something from every race, and I've enjoyed them all. I really have.
Yeah. What'd you learn from that one?
I learned that it was doable. I learned that it
it was within
the
reach.
fact that I was so close there, and that I learned that I liked it. I liked talking to people. I liked shaking hands with people. I liked meeting people. All of those kinds of things that you have to do. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
Well, to be within 7 votes, yeah, man.
Yeah.
So
As
what,
an 18-year-old kid, because the people that won were, one of them I think was, I don't know, they were all a good 30, 40 years older than I was.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it was very different.
Yeah. So what happened after that? Sul Ross? Is that
I
where
went
you
to Sul Ross. I decided, my dad and mom, my parents had a restaurant. My family had a restaurant in Alpine for 80 continuous years.
Wow.
Until they got to
Your
a
grandpa
son.
started it.
Right. They got to a son that didn't really want to own a restaurant. So but my parents needed help. And so I stayed in Alpine and I went to Sul Ross so that I could help out in the restaurant. And
What did you major in?
I majored in political science and English.
Okay.
So
And then after that,
I went to law school.
in
Well,
Texas?
actually, I took about maybe 8 months, 9 months, whatever that is, because I graduated in December of 1 year, and then I moved to Washington, D.C. I didn't really know anybody there. I didn't really have a job there, but I went and I found a job and got to know the congressman from our area, who is still around in San Antonio, a person I really have a tremendous respect for, a guy named Tom Leffler. Congressman Leffler kind of took me in, and it was a long way from home, but he made sure I was always okay and would keep in regular contact, believe it or not, with my parents. And
oh wow,
I will tell you the first time that I called home and I said, I'm going to be working in this office. I'm going to be initially it's an internship kind of thing, but I'm going to be working in this office. And keeping in mind that when I went to DC, my parents were very opposed because nobody from...
There's no family over there.
Well, that's exactly right. And my mother said, si te enfermas, if something happens to you, there's not going to be anybody there to take care of you. You won't know anybody. And my father took a different tack. My father said, mijo, you're not from a rich family, and you have 2 sisters, and we're helping them through school. And so we don't have enough money to keep you in DC. So I want it understood that if you go to DC, you're doing this on your own.
Right.
And so I said, no, I understand all that. So when I got on the phone and I called home and I said, hey, this is what I'm going to be doing. Both of my parents were on the phone, and there was silence on the line. And finally my father said, pero que no es republicano. And I said, yeah, Dad, es republicano. He's a Republican. And my father said, you don't have to do that. We'll send you money. So that was my my parents telling me what their political leanings were. So it was pretty funny. Something that we laughed at, for the rest of their lives. We always smiled and laughed when we remembered that story.
Right. Well, what was your dad on the school board as well, or was he active in the political scene?
My dad was very active in the local politics of Alpine. He served 15 years on the school board there.
School board.
Yeah. So my mother too. I mean, people give my father a lot of credit in Alpine, but the truth is that my mother was really the
driving force.
Yeah, she was the driving force. She drove the train.
Right.
She was the strategist. She was the person who mapped it all out. The person who, he went out and
she was the whole editorial board for him. Huh?
Yeah, he went out and did what she told him in terms of the strategy, and it always worked.
Yeah.
But my parents were both very political.
Okay, no, that's awesome. So it looks like my wife Judith and we both had an opportunity to meet your wife as well. So it looks like you didn't fall too far from the tree, huh?
Marilena is very good at the game and can play the game well, but she has no respect for the game, and so she's never cared for it because she, that whole story about how there's a lot of lies and deceit and all of these things in politics if you ask Marlena, she believes all that. She and I mean, unquestionably, especially today, I mean, you certainly see a lot of that,
Right.
which is unfortunate, but
Well, the landscape gets so lost in the noise, and it's one of those things. It's like, what's that saying they say about war? Like the poor are the ones who are the most affected, right? The people who in war, who gets affected the most? It's the people.
well, and I think today the challenge is to find good people to run, because a lot of good people, they don't want to be involved in all of the
Stink, right?
Yeah, it's so ugly out there. It's that, and you have to subject. You not only subject yourself to that, but you subject your family to that, and I think that's hard. It's a very hard life. I will tell you that it's a very hard life.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, no. When I met her, I had the most upright respect. She's very well poised. I could see her as the first lady somewhere for sure. And for many years she was as when you were congressman, right?
For the legislature, for the 22 years and the Congress.
So 22 years in the state,
right?
And then your term as the U.S. federal,
right?
So the total of how many years in service?
So that's 24, and then I did another couple of years at Sul Ross. So
as the president. Yeah. Let's dive into that a little bit.
It's all been fun.
How was that experience, being a full circle moment, as going in as a student, and then coming back as a president to lead? Because the higher education environment, that's a whole nother. It's different than school board, state education.
Oh, it's very different. It's very different. It's going to be less so because now the legislature is limiting the authority of universities and giving the authority to boards of regents, so that boards of regents are more involved. Because right now on the school board side, for example, the superintendent and the principal really are doing the board sets the policy, and the day-to-day implementation is on the campus. The legislature now is changing that so that the day-to-day administration is not as much on campus as it used to be. They wanted their because they don't want to see DEI and they don't want to see all these other things, so they're pulling it back to the board of regents. But during my time there, it was a wonderful experience.
The board of regents are appointed by the governor, right?
The board of regents are appointed by the governor. They're not elected. They're appointed and then confirmed by the Senate, and usually to be on the regents, you have to have some, relationship. Especially if you're on an A&M board or a UT board, those are the
flagship.
It usually involves giving a lot of money to a gubernatorial campaign. It usually involves being active in some of that stuff. They're viewed as essentially rewards.
Sure.
For
I don't know of anyone personally on the board of regents, but I know that they're typically fairly wealthy. Yeah.
Not always. San Antonio has had Cindy Cryer, for example, who was the when I met Judge Cryer, she was in the Texas Senate, and then she became county judge here in Bexar County, and she was appointed to the board of regents for the University of Texas, which is her alma mater. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's been some that
was that when Bush was governor?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that was when Bush was governor. So there are people that that you see around that are appointed. It's getting harder and harder to get those appointments, but
sure, yeah. So, what was the experience like to be the president of Sul Ross State?
I loved every minute of it. I enjoyed it tremendously because I set my own. Like for example, I was not typical in that I also wanted to teach, because most presidents didn't teach.
Right.
For me, half the fun of it was being around students.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So I also taught a class. I was the announcer for volleyball and basketball games, which was a lot of fun. I got to know all of the teams and a lot of the athletes. I ate in the cafeteria probably 3 times a week, and students would come sit with me, and I would learn about the challenges that they had or the things that were going on that we needed to fix on campus, complaints that they had. I had my finger on the pulse of the university probably better than most presidents, and I also had experience, right? I mean, I had been a student there, and I knew, and even in the legislature, I used to I had a good relationship with the president of Sul Ross when I was in the legislature for the most part. And Dr. Vic Morgan was the president that I had the best relationship with. But I would give him a hard time because I would tell him that Alpine was rushing headlong into the 1980s, and we needed to get stuff done. So when I showed up at Sul Ross, I kind of had a list of things that I wanted to build and fix and make better. And most presidents get there and they have to figure out the lay of the land first, whereas I already knew the lay of the land. And
you had the blueprints.
I had a head start. Right?
You came in at the peak or the height of COVID, right?
I did.
Oh, man. How was that?
I had to transition from in-person classes to putting everything online, which was a challenge, and then working with the faculty initially because the faculty didn't like online. I mean, you can be a great classroom teacher, but really people need to understand that teaching online is very different.
It is.
From teaching in person. And so going through all the trainings and making sure that everybody was up to par and making sure that everybody was ready, that was a big thing. Sul Ross had a big budget deficit. We were going to run out of money, but I was able to save up enough and do enough. In fact, there was an over 200% increase in the
enrollment.
No, in terms of the budget, we improved it by about 200%. Instead of being in the hole, we were actually I ran a surplus for the first time. So there were challenges every day. Every day was different. I think that's what I liked about the job is that every day was different.
Well, that's what's the hard part about the job, right? It's because once things get to your desk at that point, it's probably not good news.
Yeah, that's pretty true when it lands on your and most presidents, if you're the president of UT, you have your set responsibilities or UTSA
different provosts
or any. But at Sul Ross, I had the luxury. It was only 2,000 or so students, and so the individuals,
right,
the stories, and I like that better because it's a one-on-one relationship, and you see a lot of if the university is doing something really dumb in terms of their policies or their rules, you hear about it, you learn about it, and you can fix it.
Right. Well, Sul Ross is well known, and they've been around for many years. I know a lot of people. For as small as a school as it is, there's a lot of folks out there who've ran through those classrooms.
Oh, there were a lot of people from San Antonio there who had been in the congressional district. That I had a couple of whose houses I had walked on, or a couple of whom I'd met. I used to go to mass when I was in San Antonio, and usually one of the I like mariachi masses, and so I would go to one of the missions mass, and some of the altar boys ended up going to Sul Ross, and they'd seen me there before.
Oh, that's cool.
It was fun.
Well, you're not expecting, right? You're in another city, you're like, hey, we're both
completely different. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Yeah, those are what I call divine connections right there. Yeah. That's awesome.
It was fun.
So, closing off on this topic, what's the one thing you were most proud of while you were at Sul Ross State University?
I was proud of what we did in terms of turning around morale and in terms of the feeling, the spirit, because when you did campus environment surveys, there were a lot of people who were very unhappy there, whether you were a faculty member, a staff member, or a student. And when I left, those campus environment surveys had completely turned around. People liked it there. The employees knew that I cared about them. They knew that they had somebody that worried about them. The students felt like they had personal attention. I mean, it was a different place. So I'm really proud of our numbers improved significantly, whether it was the number of degrees that we were awarding, whether it was the budget, whether it was all of those kinds of things. I'm not one of those people who's kind of stuck doing things the same way every year. This is how we've always done it. In fact, that was if I ever asked that question and the answer came back, because this is how we've always done it, that was always the wrong answer.
Wrong answer. Yeah.
So we had the first in the nation. We did pep rallies for football, for example, but Sul Ross has a lot of national rodeo championships, and so during rodeo we wanted to do a pep rally, so we came up with the idea of a cattle drive through campus.
That's awesome.
As a pep rally, and everybody was invited out to watch the cattle drive through the campus, and they still do that.
Wow.
That was they're
keeping
started under my watch, and they still do that at the beginning of the
what a great idea
rodeo week.
Well, I mean, you think West Texas, right? You can't have a cattle drive. You can't have West Texas without a cattle drive coming down your campus.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So
a
lot of good things were done.
No, what an awesome thing to be proud of, especially during a time when COVID brought morale down across the nation, not at every level.
It really did.
Higher ed, your K through 12, working environments, everything. So
it's hard to believe that it ever happened. Now it feels like just a different world in those days,
I still almost feel like it's, we're back to where we were, but I feel like it was just yesterday. But man, it's been 5 years since, I guess, started the start of it, right? In 2022. So before you jumped into the presidency role, your focus at the federal political level, what made you make that jump after 22 years as in the state legislature to go to federal?
Well, I stayed in the legislature 22 years because I thought at some point I was going to be speaker, and I came very close on several occasions. The last time we ended up winning 74 Democratic seats, and there were 76 Republican seats. If we had come in at 75-75, then I had the votes to be speaker because I had enough Republicans who were willing to vote for me. So we came very close. But then the next time, it was the Obama midterm, and we went from 74 Democrats to, 52 or 3. We lost 20-something seats. And so at that point, it became very clear to me that I was not, God did not want me to be speaker. So I needed to find something else to do. And interestingly enough, as I was turning all of that over in my mind, Nicolas, who I used to take to the House floor, take to the chamber every day, he literally grew up in session years. He grew up on the House floor. And, I was holding his hand as we walked out of the House chamber one day, and he looked at me and he said, "Dad, I've been coming here a long time, and I know where all the secret places are now. I know where all the little tunnels are. I know where all the secret places are in this chamber. And I'm ready to go play in a different chamber." And I don't know, he was 6 or 8. I don't remember exactly how old he was. But I said, "Oh, really? That's very interesting." And so that kind of pushed me a little bit further in what I thought that was kind of a message from God speaking to me through Nicolas, saying, "Okay, it's time. Go do something else."
Yeah.
So the Senate seat wasn't really open, and I had Carlos Oresti was the senator at that time, and it's not that Carlos and I were close friends. We weren't that close, but a lot of our supporters were the same, and it would have been a really awkward,
the divided
thing.
race. Yeah.
So I never really thought of that. I liked a lot of Carlos's family, the Orestes I'd known for a while, and so I decided to run in that congressional race, and it was a tough decision. I had the coolest office in the state capitol. There's only one big balcony, and my office had the balcony, and I had a cool view of UT, and it's beautiful. But it was very different. When Nicolas showed up in my office in D.C., he took a tour, and I had chosen well. I had a big office. It was a very nice office in Washington. But Nicolas wanders around, and he finally came back to me, and he said, "Dad, you gave up the balcony for this?" And it was hilarious. But that's what made me do it. I mean, I realized I'd done what I was going to do. I was highly regarded, and everybody was bummed that I had decided to do that. But
so some sort of divine intervention through Nicholas, right?
I was ready, and then the little conversations that I was having, I just decided to jump.
Yeah, it was a surplus of the right things altogether as well. You talk about session. Every time you were in session, Nicholas playing around. For those who don't know what cadence and scheduling at the state level, and given the situation we're in now, currently under session,
sure.
what is the schedule look like for a state representative, and what is session?
Well, you have to remember that the legislature meets one time every 2 years. You know, Congress is in session all the time, but in Texas, the legislature only meets every other year. So you have one shot. If you want to change the law, if you want to do something different, you have one shot every 2 years to change the law. So that automatically makes it pretty intense because you're in session for 140 days. And a guy named Pete Laney, who was the speaker during a large part of my legislative career, wanted to change the rules. When I first got there, the legislature would be debating rules until midnight of the last day, and debating bills and passing bills and trying to get signatures, and it was crazy because you had no idea what was in a bill, and you were still, it was crazy.
Chaos.
And so Speaker Laney changed the rules, and he moved everything back, so you had more time to. When I first showed up there, you could be voting on a bill that was 1,000 pages, and you had maybe an hour to read it. So there was no way that you were going to know what was in there. But Speaker Laney changed all of that, and so now there's all of these deadlines that kick in that are before the session ends. So the last day of the session isn't really a big deal. When I first got there, the last day of the session was a huge deal because they had been known in the past to stop the clock at 11:59 and keep going, and then the official clock would be stopped, so they would go another hour or two to pass bills. But they don't. Laney made sure that none of that ever happened. But it's a very intense time.
Mm-hmm.
It's even more intense now that they're not friends, and everybody's mad at everybody else, and nobody likes anybody, and it just that adds to that atmosphere, to that environment.
The division,
right?
For sure. Were you there during that filibuster with what was her name?
When Wendy Davis filibustered. Yeah, I.
What was the whole context about that whole situation?
That was it was a pro-choice fight that they had, and Wendy put on some pink tennis shoes, and she spoke and kept everybody for hours. And it was, there are a few moments where the minority party can actually stop and slow things down and make a difference. For me personally, I think one of the high water marks was we were able to talk on the House side 52 or 53 Democrats into getting on buses and going to Oklahoma to kill a redistricting bill so that the session deadline would pass. And everybody got on the bus. Nobody knew where the buses were going except for three of us. But they got on anyway because that's how much trust there was, in those days.
And why did y'all go to Oklahoma?
Well, because it was probably the fastest to get to in terms of getting away and not being stopped by DPS and not being found. And by the time that people realized that we had actually gone, first of all, nobody believed that we would actually do it. So by the time they sent the troopers to chase us down, we were already across the state line.
So the irony from a Texas guy thinking that Oklahoma saves the day, huh? Jeez.
They were Oklahoma, and when the Senate did it, the Senate went to New Mexico. The Senate had a very different.
So what's that strategy like? So it's they leave because there wouldn't be a quorum. Is that what? And then the time
you leave to kill
passes.
the quorum, right?
Okay.
It's a legislative tool. You know, Abraham Lincoln. People say that you shouldn't run and you shouldn't do whatever, but Abraham Lincoln was a quorum breaker. Abraham Lincoln jumped out of a second floor window while he was a member of the Illinois legislature in order to break a quorum. So it's a well-known thing.
Tactic, yeah.
It's not.
So the idea is there's a deadline where everybody has to be in quorum and vote, and if you're not there during that deadline time,
the bills are dead.
The bills are dead. It doesn't pass.
Right.
Okay.
And so, for us, that was a redistricting bill that was not very favorable.
A gerrymandering.
It was
just redistricting.
Yeah, it was really bad, and so we were able to get across the border to
New Mexico, Oklahoma. Interesting. Yeah, these stories. You know, I feel like it's so hard to follow state politics or the discussions and the maybe I'm trying to find the right words. Maybe the especially like right now, right? We're in session. What's going on? Like, where is it leaning towards? Obviously, if it's a Republican-led House and Senate, then yeah, you know it's kind of leaning towards that way. But to figure out, like you said, you get 1,000 pages in an hour to read, and those are the people who actually get the physical books or digital copies. You know, for most of us out here, it's just a black box, and okay, I guess we live with whatever comes out, right?
Well, it's even worse now because it used to be that there were a lot of you could have a press conference in the Capitol and the room would be full of reporters. You'd have 50, 80, 100 reporters from all of these newspapers and TV stations, and now you have a press conference and there's maybe 10 people because a lot of the newspapers, I mean, if you look around in the area, there's not a lot of local newspapers anymore.
Like
they're not
the Texas Tribune.
Texas Tribune is one of the few that is a statewide thing. But if you look at the smaller towns, Del Rio, for example, the Del Rio News Herald stopped publishing several years back. You know, if you look at the smaller newspapers are struggling. Radio stations don't really cover as much as they used to. People are now online and they're doing satellite radio instead of the. So the way that we get our news is very different.
That's true.
And as a result, it makes it harder to keep up with. And plus, you have a lot of these people that are fly-by-night, you know, people that are not really journalists. They're scandal mongers. You know, they're muckrakers.
Yeah,
they're
bait clickers.
They just want to cause trouble, and so they're not too worried about journalistic ethics or telling the truth. What they do is they make everybody panic because they say, "Oh, you know, this is what's happening."
Take something out of context.
Yeah. So you have a lot of that. I think it makes it hard to keep up with. I enjoy reading the Texas Tribune, and there's a couple of others. Axios does some coverage. The local newspapers that exist, the larger ones, the Chronicle in Houston, the Austin American Statesman, I have a lot of respect for. So Dallas Morning News, but I think all of that, if there was more of that, if people were more informed, I think it would make a big difference. I think you know the as lo que pasa. I mean, people think, look, those guys have been meeting every 2 years since the 1800s, and my life is still what it is.
Right.
My life passes many laws, whatever. I'm still struggling to pay my bills. I've got the same problems I had yesterday, and there's the same problems I'm going to have tomorrow.
Right.
So why should I participate? Why should I care?
That's the sentiment of many, right?
It is, and
most.
And I think that's the unfortunate part because people don't realize how much of a difference government can make through policy. I mean, you can incentivize or disincentivize behavior through tax policy. You can build and fix, roads or parks or bridges, or there's a lot of things that can be done. And I think in my part of the world, which was a very conservative part of the world, people saw when I was in the legislature and in the leadership the good that could be done, because all of a sudden things were changing for us. There was a new loop around Eagle Pass and a new DPS building in Del Rio and Eagle Pass, or a new building. We actually built an entire campus working with Southwest Texas Junior College for Sul Ross in Del Rio, so that people in Del Rio had better access to higher ed. And did the same in Uvalde and Eagle Pass. So you can do some good, but you need to have the right people. And if you ask me, a lot of times now, we have people who are interested in politics. We don't have people who are interested in policy.
Well said. Yeah, I find it hard to be able to keep up with what's going on at the state, and I'm curious, what do you do to try to keep your pulse on? How do you get your news?
For me, it's actually hard not to. I try not to keep my pulse on stuff because it's so disappointing, and I hate to say that publicly, but a lot of the news is always bad.
Right.
But I think I have to be able to talk about things that are going on. And so I look online at reputable sources. I look at some of the social media that I think is more reputable. I still rely on the things that I read as a kid, Time Magazine or Newsweek. At the state level, like I say, I still look at the newspapers. I still look at some of the coverage. And I talk to people who are there, who are part of the, whether they're current members of the legislature, whether they're former members of the legislature, whether they're reporters now or reporters from a long time ago that are still kind of in the loop because I want to make sure that what I'm reading is not exaggerated. Right. So I will call somebody and say, "Hey, this is what I read. Is this true?" And usually 9 times out of 10, they'll say, "Yeah, that's true." And you'll be disappointed. I mean, it was never a big deal when somebody died, for example. It was never a big deal for the legislature, Republicans and Democrats, to extend condolences to the family. So Governor Richard's daughter, Cecile, died. She had cancer. She had brain cancer. And the legislature had a motion to extend condolences to her family. And all of a sudden that became a big thing because, Cecile Richards had been part of Planned Parenthood and had been this and had been that, and she was a big Democrat and this and that, and all of a sudden they didn't want to extend condolences to the family. And you're thinking, really? I mean,
it's so trivial.
It's something, it's just, so those are the kinds of things that I think for me are always disappointing. I mean, I could argue against you all day long, but I'd still drink a beer with you at the end of the day.
I feel like, man, long gone are the days where people could argue and then work together at the end of the day, like good neighbors should, right?
No, el odio que se tienen uno al otro, the sheer bitterness and rancor that you see today in politics is very disappointing, because being a Republican or being a Democrat, to me, it just had to do with a philosophy of how you approach things. It wasn't it wasn't anything personal in that sense, right? So, but these days it is very personal, and the division is more stark than I've ever seen it. Maybe not more stark than ever. I mean, I guess the Civil War was probably more stark,
Right.
but it's still worse than I've ever seen it. I mean, people who unfriend each other on Facebook just because, people who don't talk to each other or don't do business with each other.
He's not liking my post, so.
Or people who don't have, they don't socialize with people because they're one party or another. I've never really seen it to the extent that you see it now.
Sure.
And,
I say long gone are the days, but let me walk that back. The pendulum always swings back, and maybe there's a leader that'll bring, when Obama came in, he came behind hope, right? And trying to bring people together. Maybe there's a leader.
But on the other hand, I mean, Trump was a reaction to.
Right. So pendulum swung back, right?
Obama, right? I mean, everything is a reaction to the other. And so at some point, you just want to find. I guess that's what, for me, is frustrating, is that most Americans aren't right wing or left wing. Most Americans are in the middle, but
Right.
Nobody politically seems to want to go to the middle. And that's where the people are. I think that's where a lot of the solutions would be.
One of the famous, maybe not famous, but when I think of conservatives, I always think of small government, right? Pushing things down. And it's like, then it goes down to family values, your nuclear family and Christian values, right? And I think that trajectory, I think there's truth there to be able to help your neighbor, be a good person, those values. A lot happens at the local political level, right? And, this mayoral candidacy for runoff that we have here seems to have gotten tied up into the National Democratic Party and the state Republican Party values, maybe, but more so money, right? Because those were also the top two donation PAC money receivers. I think, Beto had a lot of his own. Others had loans. I think Adriana Rocha Garcia had a lot of grassroots, but nowhere near compared to what the others did.
Well, I don't think it's new. I think it's been coming for a while. They used to say that all politics is local, that it didn't really matter, the DC stuff. But now everybody wants to be like DC. Everybody wants to be. The legislature in Austin wants to be like a mini version of Congress. And so now, if you say Democrat in Texas, you think of the national Democrats. Texas Democrats were always more conservative and were always different, but nobody sees that. Republicans, the same, right? When you think of the National Republican Party, you think of Trump, and Trump has done a lot to create that. I mean, a lot of the people, the more moderate business community, they don't have anywhere to go now, right? Because they are not comfortable really. He's kind of conquered the party. So I think all of that, especially at the grassroots level, has really changed. And so the two candidates now are the support that they receive, the that division that you see. I mean, again, it's not new. You were seeing that in other places already in mayor's races, right? In New York or LA or these other big cities,
right,
where the parties come in and try to dictate who the candidates might be. And until we get voters engaged, and until we get, I mean, personally, I wish that the voters would
turn out.
I mean, that's harder than it looks. It really is difficult,
especially during the midterm. I mean, it was an off-year election that San Antonio had during Fiesta. I mean, all those things were
right. And frankly, the worst turnout always. I mean, for me, in one of the things that happened in the 23rd was the legislature took out of the district precincts in San Antonio that had high turnout that were Latino, and replaced them with districts in El Paso that were Latino but had low turnout. And then they increased. At that time, the north side of San Antonio was not very mixed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was not the Latino centric part of town that it's turning out to be now. So you could look at the 23rd and say, yeah, well, it's still Latino,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of turnout, it wasn't really a Latino. And you see that it really matters who turns out. And when you look at it, the south side of San Antonio is not a great turnout
That's the worst.
area. Yeah, it's just not a great turnout area. And frankly, it's disappointing because they're the ones that have the most at stake many
That's
times.
right. Yeah, District 4, District 5, and District 3 in the city are, those are your lowest turnout voters, and you can win an election with a couple thousand, where up north, it's 10,000 that you need to win or so. But
I used to tell people there was a member of the legislature in one of the districts who could win an election with 16 to 1,800 votes in a state rep district of 160,000 people.
jeez,
And I used to tell him...
was that in San Antonio?
No.
Oh.
It was in North Texas. But I used to laugh at him because I would say, man, I have that many cousins. I have that many cousins, and I could just get my cousins to vote.
Yeah.
I'd win an election in your district, man.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the power in getting newer voters, right? And maybe even if they don't win, I'll say one of the pros that I saw with District 4's city council run, Edward Munguia won. I
Good guy.
I supported him. I was the treasurer on his campaign, and his the number 2 guy who ran, who came right under him, I also went to high school with. He was a couple years older than me, but most of the people he got to come out and to vote never voted before. So there was something special there where it's like, okay, if you do it for your cousin, and now at least you're registered to vote, right? And so you don't have an excuse to come out to the polls. So I think there was something beautiful there in that I think everybody wants better for themselves and everybody wants better for their family. And if you can just connect them with the right like reason to do it, right? He's doing it because it's his cousin. It's his, and yeah, like you said, you have that many primos, right, to come out and vote. And yeah, the Martinezes, man, there's a lot of them everywhere. and I mean, just that concept, right? And you do that a couple times, and you do that a little bit where maybe that advocacy to get people to start voting. I don't know if it's enough, but it's something,
Well, I think the other part of that is that the elected officials that you vote for, that you elect, they have to follow through on what they said they were going to do.
That's true.
Right? They have to. You can't be. I don't want you to go out and get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to go out and get in trouble. There can't be all this scandal, right?
Right.
You have to just settle down and work at what you said that you were going to work at, and you can't get carried away that, oh my God, now you're an elected official. That can't be. I mean, Ann Richards used to make me laugh when she would talk to people. She would come in. She was a good friend to me and a good mentor. But one of the things that she said just always stuck with me, because she said, winning an election doesn't make you any smarter. And that's true. You're still who you were the day before,
Right.
and who you will be the day after. It's just a question of, don't believe your own press releases. You keep doing what got you in office. Don't change.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get carried away. Just do your work. And if you do your work well, people will notice, and you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. So true. So you mentioned you learned something in every election. You ran against Gina, right, for District 23?
No, Gina came along after.
She came after.
She came after me. I was gonna. People were trying to get me to run another time, and Gina called me to see if I was gonna run, and by that point I had already decided that I didn't really want to do that again. and I had already run. I think I'd won one and lost one, and Gina had called and said, "Look, I'm gonna run if you don't." And so I said, "Well, let's
Go right ahead. Yeah.
jump in there. I'm done."
Yeah. Go get him, cowgirl.
Mhm.
What did you ever get to know her opponent, Pablos?
Not. I met them all
Mm-hmm.
because everybody wanted me to endorse and everybody wanted me to do whatever. So to actually get to know them, no. I mean, did I meet them? Sure,
Yeah.
but I didn't really get to know.
Know them very well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the trouble too, right? Once you get to those larger races, it's like, at your local races, school board, I bet everybody knew your dad, man.
Well, when I was
Everybody.
I'll tell you what. I'd been in the legislature. I'd been the state rep from that district for 22 years. I could pick any Friday night football game in any one of those counties, and I was going to know half the crowd.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference when you really know people. And
It does.
in San Antonio, in a bigger city, you don't know whose district you live in. So you have no idea who your state rep is,
Mhm.
where the lines are.
Mhm.
Right? Out where I was, there was only one state rep because it was countywide.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knew who their state rep was, right? Because there was only one person. Here, you can't keep track of the districts, and you can't keep track of. You have a different commissioner, you have a different whatever,
Right.
and that you have some of that, but you only.
Well, it's just
have,
not so convoluted.
Right.
That you've got county, you've got city, you've got federal Congress, you got state Congress, state.
The example that I used to use in Rotaries and Lions and whatever is that, look, one of the reasons that we do so well in rural areas is seniority, because I would use the example of, look, if you ask a member of the legislature from Houston, would you rather be one of 32 state reps from Houston, or would you rather be the mayor of Houston? Well, everybody would always say, well, no, I want to be the mayor. I would want to be the mayor of Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I didn't have any desire to be the mayor of Alpine.
Mm.
Right. Because for the district that I had lots of mayors, but only one state rep. Whereas in Houston, they have lots of state reps, but only one mayor. Right. So the pyramid was inverted. So that made it a lot easier for me. I think that's what state reps in San Antonio and even city councilmen struggle with is, or council persons struggle with, is that name ID, right? That getting known.
Right. No, well said. What do you, we talked about pendulum coming back and forth. What do you think is going to happen in the next presidential election?
Well, I think in the midterms, the Democrats get the U.S. House back,
Mm-hmm.
which, and all of this happens in other parts of the country. I don't really think it happens in Texas. I think Texas is what Texas is. We might pick up a few seats in the legislature, but we're not going to be anywhere near majority. I think that'll take a while to change. It's going to take, the Democratic brand here is damaged, and I think it'll take a while to fix. But I do think that on the national level, the Democrats come back. And then I think that Trump is an aberration. There's been nobody like him before, and I don't think there'll ever be anybody like him again. I think that we'll have a Democratic president in the next cycle, assuming that the Democrats actually stick together, work together, and help each other out, which is not a given by any chance, right? I mean, chances are that I mean, you never know. I mean, that's one of the interesting things about being a Democrat.
Yeah. What did you learn in the Will Hurd election?
I learned to trust my own judgment, but I learned too late, right? In those days was the beginning of what are called trackers, the people who would follow you around with a camera. and they were paid to follow you around with the camera, and they would, be hiding behind a bush, and they would jump up when you were walking by the sidewalk and yell at you and try to make you mad and try to get you to make some really crazy expression on your face, and then that was the video in the campaign ad. For Ciro Rodriguez, for example, who represented the district before me, they set somebody up at a town hall meeting and got to question Ciro until he got mad. And when he got mad and when he pounded on the table, that was the campaign ad, right? And so people tried to protect me from the people with the cameras and didn't really let me, whereas I wasn't Ciro, right? And I wasn't anybody else. I don't really have much of a temper. It's just, I don't really raise my voice. I don't really get mad. It's just not who I am, right? I'm actually very patient, and I will let you yell, and then I'll say, okay, are you done yelling? Because now let's have a conversation, right?
Right.
And so I learned that part of the thing about, for me at least, about being in Congress was that I never really never intended to be there. My grandparents, one worked cattle and the other built fences. And if you had asked either one of them, your kid's going to be a member of Congress, they would have laughed, right? And so there was some of the imposter syndrome. I'm not supposed to be here, right?
Right.
So when all of these so-called experts were saying, well, no, you shouldn't be doing this or you shouldn't be doing that, hell, I should have been out there because that election was so close. It was 1,000 votes or so. It was super close. That if I had done more of the public stuff, I would have won, right? And that's what I wanted to do, except that everybody said, no, don't go out there. And
they were worried to get a bad angle on you.
Right. Right. So I learned to trust my own judgment and to be my own person. I really learned. I love learning every day still now. I learned something from every governor that I served under. I learned from every speaker that I served under. I learned a lot from several of the, from Bob Bullock. I really, if I was, 27 again and running for the legislature all over again, if I knew then what I know now, geez, I would be unstoppable. Yeah. It'd be a different place.
Right. And with that makes me excited to see what Nicolas is going to do, right?
Well, Nicolas has certainly had his share of, he has experiences that I never had. I mean, he has met, the Secret Service used to come by and pick up Nicolas so that he could hang out with Joe Biden. When Joe Biden was the vice president, Nicolas has hung out with members of the legislature and with senators and with he's grown up. No le tiene miedo a nada. So whereas I had that
imposter syndrome,
he doesn't have that.
Yeah,
he doesn't have that.
He belongs,
and he belongs anywhere because I used to take him. One of the other things I'm really proud of is there are areas in Eagle Pass that were colonias. That when I was in the legislature and I was on the appropriations committee doing the budget, I made sure that they got water and sewer. And I remember, taking Nicolas to Eagle Pass and going door to door, and there were kids playing in the front yard, and the front yard was a little muddy. It was mushy. It had water and stuff, and the kids were playing in the front yard, and we went inside, and it was a very humble home, and they were extremely nice to me and to Nicolas. And then when we left, I asked him, hey, did you notice that the front yard had, that it was all wet? And he said, yeah, and it kind of smelled a little bit. And I said, yeah, Nicolas, the family that we went to visit, they didn't have running water. And so what you saw was the sewer drain into their yard. And Nicolas, you could see the realization that not everybody has running water in their house, right? and the realization that those are the kinds of things that I would take Nicolas to shelters of battered kids and spouses so that he could see. I would take him to places so that he would understand why we were doing what we were doing, right? So that he would develop this empathy. And he did. He's extremely empathetic and wants to make the world a better place. And I think for his generation, it's going to be a lot harder just because it's a lot meaner.
Right.
And now that you have all of this, you can use some computer program to have somebody saying something that they never said. Right. You just create all this stuff. And I think that makes it's very difficult. And I wish him a lot of luck. I obviously love him a lot. And whatever career he chooses, I know that he'll be good at it.
Yeah. He's got great energy, and I think this, whatever he ends up doing, he'll be great at. Yeah,
He's been a joy to raise. It's been literally, it is the most fun that his mother and I have ever had. He's been a fun kid. I can't say kid for much longer. Well, I guess he'll
always be your kid. Yeah. Well, you see, I think a kid's a promotion. My dad would say I'm still his baby, and so my mom too. So
that's true. That's true.
I don't think they ever get out of that. Was there a mentor you had growing up?
Well, I think originally my mentors were my parents. That was, I looked up to them. I wanted to emulate them. I wanted to learn from them. I wanted to be like them. And it got to as I climbed every level, my parents couldn't really relate, for example, to law school because they'd never been. So at every level, you find somebody else that can help you along the way. Probably the person that I learned more from than anybody besides my parents was my mentor in the legislature, who was the Pete Laney, who became speaker. He probably taught me more than anybody other than my own dad. Yeah, he was pretty amazing to me. He was great. He and his chief of staff, Barry Miller, kind of coached me along and taught me to be a good statesman instead of just a loud voice, a loud mouth.
Yeah. What's something you wish someone would have told you when you were younger?
I wish somebody had explained the concept of picking and choosing your battles, and that you get more with honey than with vinegar. Those are things that I learned later in life. You don't have to fight about everything. Choose 2 or 3 or 4 things that are important, and let other people win and have their dignity. You don't have to win every fight. Take your half loaf and move on. I think as a kid, I was probably so stuck on getting my way and winning. And I was 27 when I ran for the legislature. If you had called me a kid back then, I would have resented it. But when I look back, I was a kid.
Yeah.
And when I look at myself in high school and college, I probably wasn't the most helpful to others, or the most friendly even to others, and I really regret that. I mean, I think there was when we had a 10-year reunion. I remember thinking, one of the people at our high school reunion asked, why he should come to our reunion, because nobody liked him then. Why should they like him now? And it just really hurt me, because I thought, I have great memories of high school, and he obviously didn't have that experience, right? And I realized that everybody's experiences are important, and you should try to make everybody feel a sense of belonging. A sense of and I wish people had explained that to me in detail. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten it, but I get it now, and I've tried to instill that in Nicolas.
Yeah. I think when you're younger and you're in high school and you're in middle school, it's a lot of time it's survival, right? Because I to say this now, I feel like high school was like a prison almost at times, right? It sounds kind of crazy, but when you're going through it, you're like, man, we have to live and die by the bell. You're tardy, then you get alternative, right? You know, it's kind of like consignment or whatever. And I remember in football, the football people, I was in football, all the jocks would hang out, and then the little gangsters would hang out, and then everybody had their little sense of belonging. And I remember one time the little gangsters at Dwight wanted to play football. And man, we were ready to lay it on them. I mean, we were like, all right, we're going to show them who's boss, who's the real strong people, and who can. And we did, and we made them quit. And it wasn't until I graduated high school, went to college, and like, yeah, I wasn't in that scene anymore, right? Like the high school football, it's done, man. That's it. And middle school, it was this, and this was in middle school. I remember thinking, because I saw one of them ended up in prison because he shot somebody, shot the shotgun right there right across from South San. And I remember thinking, man, they were just trying to belong. And you mentioned being friendly. I wasn't so friendly with them. And I remember hitting them. He laid one of them out, and they got up. Good hit, man. Good. And I didn't say nothing. And how old was I? 12, 13 years old, and it's like, why was I like that? It was just survival. And had I had enough vision or maturity, right, to be able to see, maybe
I think that's what it is.
Maybe he could have been different.
It is maturity, and it is a different approach. I look back, high school wasn't really. I had fun, but I had fun because of the people that were around, that I was around. But it was very difficult for me because even my parents would tell me that I didn't know how to take no for an answer, right?
Mm.
And the worst thing that you could tell me as a kid is because I said so, right? And so when I went to school and we were doing something, and I would ask, well, why do we have to learn this? What's the theory? Tell me why we have to learn this. And you were told, don't ask questions. Just mind your own business and just do what you're told. Well, I wasn't a do what you're told. If I had followed all the rules that I was supposed to follow, I'd be the best dishwasher in Alpine, Texas right now. Right? I mean, that's because the fact that I did things differently is what got me to where I was, right? But that was not appreciated when I was in high school. People didn't appreciate my counselor told me that I would be doing, my freshman year, told me that I'd be a good stockroom clerk because I could count by tens, right? And so the attitude was that I wasn't really ever, but it was just me asking questions. Because if I, people tell you to wait your turn. Well, my turn wasn't going to come.
Yeah.
And so at some point you kind of have to take the bull by the horns. You got to go get it. And I don't think people were ready for that in retrospect.
Well, that's something that's in you. How did that get in you? Think you were born like that, or you think you learned it from someone?
Oh, I think it was taught me by my parents. When I was a kid and the schools were segregated, and my dad was the guy working to integrate the schools, and people would leave, they'd come empty their trash can on your front doorstep, and you'd get obscene. There was no caller ID, none of that kind of stuff in those days, and so you'd be getting all of these obscene phone calls, and people would cuss you out on the phone and all of that. I learned it, right? I learned, look, we have to, there's better than this. This shouldn't be happening. We need to fix this.
Right.
As opposed to, from some people I would hear, ay, mijo, es la voluntad de Dios. And I would think, no, I don't think that God intended for us to live this way. I think God intends for everybody to maximize their potential, and we need to be able to maximize our potential.
Right.
So it was just a different, I think I learned that from my parents. I was the only one of a lot of the students that I hung out with that went to grad school. I mean, most didn't even go to college
Right.
in my neighborhood.
Especially in those days.
Yeah. And so when in my family, it wasn't a question of whether you were going to college, it was where you were going to college. And I ended up, I was the boy. My sisters were gone. They were all in other places. So I stayed home to work in my father's restaurant and got my degree there at Sul Ross.
What is your purpose in life?
I think probably my purpose in life has changed over time. And I still want to make the world a better place. That was what drove me for a long time. The idea of public service, the idea of, you see, I don't believe that we're helpless. I don't believe that, if your street doesn't have water and sewer or sidewalks or street lights or whatever, that it's just how it is. Too bad. So sad. I don't believe that. So I think for the longest time I was really about changing and doing, and then I became about teaching and showing people that there was a different way, and creating a pipeline of talent, using my office to train people, to teach people. And then later on in life, now I still dabble in some of that teaching and helping and mentoring and advising and counseling and all of that. But I think now my purpose in life is just to make sure that Nicolas is okay, to make sure that he lands on his feet wherever he is, and that whatever happens, if I die tomorrow, he's ready to do whatever it is that he wants to do,
Right.
and has the freedom to do that. So I don't ever tell him, you need to do. I thought, because he was so articulate and because he talks, I thought he would be a lawyer. But then one day he said, I don't want to be a lawyer. Why would I want to be a lawyer? There's too many lawyers in the family. And so I thought, okay, so what do you want to do? And so there was never any disappointment that he's not going to be a lawyer. It's, he gets to, that's the whole thing. I think every parent, my dad owned a restaurant, but it was a restaurant that he didn't necessarily, it was a restaurant he inherited. It's not necessarily something that he wanted. He wanted to work cattle and be a rancher is what he wanted to do. And I wanted to make sure that my son had choices, and I think my son will have choices.
Right.
Just as I did.
Yeah. Well said. What's one thing you want people to know about you? You've been in the public light for a long time.
Oh, I think people already know all about me. I mean, there's not much. There's not much left. I mean, I think one of the people think I'm outgoing and friendly, and I try to be friendly and I try to be outgoing, but my natural, to be honest, I mean, if you give me a couch and a good book and maybe a fireplace, I'm perfectly content. I don't really need to be around people. I don't really need to be, I'm not high maintenance in that sense. But I also don't intend to be rude, because sometimes if I'm reading that book, or if I'm focused on something that I'm doing, I'm one of those people that can
Zone out.
And a lot of times people will say, "No saludaste," and it's like, "Oh man, I'm sorry. I didn't see you, or I didn't notice you, or whatever. I just so I it's never intentional, but I'm absent-minded, I guess, in that sense, or focused, or whatever it is."
Okay. These next couple questions are a little bit more deep, a little bit more morbid, maybe.
Wow. Okay.
Whose death affected you greatly?
I think there's probably been several. In terms of my family, my parents, those were really hard to handle. And
How long ago?
Gosh, my father died now a long time ago, 2010. My mother probably about 3 years ago. But I guess the difference is I never really entirely felt like I was on my own or an adult, because there was always somebody that you could call to make you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, when you realize that you're the old person now, all of a sudden it's your turn. I think that was hard for me. I had a first cousin and then another friend of mine who died in car accidents, who were my age, and we were young. I was in my early 20s, and it taught me about mortality, and that, it could all end. Life is fragile. It really is a thread.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know from one day to the next. My cousin was on his way. It was spring break. He was on his way to spend his spring break with me, and he died in a car accident on the way to see me. And
jeez,
that was hard. It taught me about mortality. Those were probably and then I had a friend from Alpine. It's actually from Ozona, but he had family in Alpine. Would spend his summers in Alpine. Who was killed in a motorcycle accident. And it was one of those people who had everything, and it was just buena gente, such a good guy. And it's like, all that you planned, all that you thought about, all that you dreamed, all that you hoped, it's gone. It was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that question always, those are the great equalizers, right? Life and death, and birth, and like you said, all gone. Nobody can escape them. Those are the things that bring families together and also separate, right? And tear families apart. If you were to die today, who's the one person you would call before?
I would probably call Nicolas just to tell him that it's his turn, right? I'm passing the baton. I probably wouldn't call Marlena because she'd probably be at my bedside anyway. She'd be right there on the phone with me.
What would you say to Nicolas?
I would tell him what my mother had told me right before she died. Solo te quiero decir que te quiero mucho. And I would tell Nicolas that I love you very much, always have, always will. And I know you're ready for this. I know you're grown up, and you've trained well, and you've learned a lot, and I know you're ready. And I'll be watching, and I'll be when you need me. I'll be interceding with I'll be praying to God for you too.
Mm-hmm. What would you tell Maria?
For Marilena, I would tell her that she has just brought me such incredible joy, not only as the mother of our son, but just as a partner, as a spouse. She made a tremendous difference in my life when I was careening off the rails back and forth. She balanced me. She was just this incredible wealth of common sense and encouragement and just kind of both kind of slapping you a little bit and saying, okay, as well as
wives are good at that.
Dusting you off and sending you back into the game. She was really good at that. Is really good at that.
Yeah. Do you believe in God?
I absolutely believe in God.
Why?
Because I just know He's there. I know He's watching. I know Roman Catholicism for me, it's
faith.
It's kind of a core value to me. I don't see me going anywhere. It's what I was raised with. I feel it in sunrises and sunsets. I feel it in the faces of children. the majestic vistas of West Texas, I know that God is there, and I know that He is watching, and I know that He is calling on us to do better. So, yeah, I do. I have a lot of faith.
Has your faith always been this strong?
Yes. Yes, it's never wavered. It's part of the reason I don't ever lose my temper. It's part of the reason that I don't ever feel despair. I don't ever feel, because I know that at the end of the day, it's working the way that it's supposed to. And it may not be the way that I wanted it to work. It may not be what I wanted, right? But I know that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I know that God loves me, and I know that that at the end of the day, it's going to be okay.
Okay. This last part here is what we call the timeline segment.
Okay.
And we share this with our students for the nonprofit.
Okay. So I will tell you that my first 5 years, I don't have much recollection of. I have a few here and there. I remember my grandmother, who died in 63 or 64, giving me gifts. I remember there's vague recollections here and there. It's just sharing an impact. Elementary school. But I will tell you that probably the most impactful things that I remember for me, when I started realizing what life was, were in high school. It dawned on me, I was elected student council vice president when I was a freshman at the end of my freshman year. And I don't know, it made people uncomfortable because I started asking questions. And it dawned on me that everybody just wanted me to smile and mind my own business. And I was not a good smiler and minding my own business. I wanted to
ask why.
Yeah, I wanted to ask questions. And that started a really difficult phase because Nicolas has always laughed at me because he says already he's a more successful student than I was because he made it all the way through school without being expelled. I was expelled. For a period of time there, for essentially asking too many questions, and the school board reinstated me and whatever. But that was impactful for me because it taught me that Emerson has an essay on self-reliance that I like to read when I'm feeling put upon, and it talks about how that for nonconformity, the world whips you with its displeasure, and I think that's true. That's what I felt, and everybody was just. When I graduated from college, I went through college in 2 years. I wouldn't do that again, but what I learned from that was that what I've learned now is that I had all my whole life, to be an adult and to pay bills. I was so ready to go out and be my own man, and so ready to go out and have my own job and do my own stuff. I wish I'd been a kid longer. I graduated too soon. I didn't have enough fun. I didn't go on spring break trips. My spring breaks were, obviously, I was in Alpine at Sul Ross, and my spring break was working in my dad's restaurant full time. It wasn't. So now I can tell you about that. Law school was a lesson for me in humility, because at UT, I had been used to in Alpine being one of the smarter kids, and I was student council president, and I was all this and all that. But everybody in my law school class was a student council president, and everybody in my law school was smart, and everybody. And so that was a lesson in humility, because all of a sudden I was average at best.
Right.
I wasn't used to that. I
Mhm.
didn't realize how many smart people there were in the world, and I wasn't necessarily one of them.
Yeah.
That was. But I graduated from law school. I turned 24 right after my ceremony, I think. And,
Wow, that's fast.
So I was young, and then I went through a period of time where I did jury trials, where I was trying cases. I learned a lot about people. That's where I learned to pick, because you try to pick people who like you, who can relate to you, who you think you're going to have a rapport with on a jury panel. And I got really good at picking people. I can still do that. I can still tell people, generally what they're like, generally what they're going to think. That gave me some incredible life skills that I wouldn't trade for the world. It was a really tough time of my life, because I was working 60 to 80-hour weeks. I was in the courtroom. Sometimes I had a jury trial every week
In Travis County?
and I was in the AG's office, so I was doing wherever. I tried cases in Bexar County. I
All
tried
over
cases
Texas.
in Valverde County. I tried them in Harris
So
County.
was
I
that
tried
under
them-
Abbott?
It was. I worked for Attorney General Maddox. Jim Maddox
Okay.
was the.
He was before.
He was way before. He was in the 80s,
Okay.
and in fact, he and Governor Richards were the people in the runoff for governor when the year that Dan Richards was elected governor in 1990. So
Wow.
it was a really intense, but I wouldn't trade it. But I was having high blood pressure and nosebleeds and all sorts of stuff.
At 25
yeah.
years old?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, and one of the things I loved, I had a lawyer in El Paso one time it was this really long, probably 3-week trial on a death case. And the lawyer was a lot older than I was, and he kept telling me he was going to kick my rear end. And although that's not what he said, he used a little bit more of a graphic term.
Sure.
And every day when I showed up in the courtroom, that's what he would greet me with. And at the end of the day, the jury sided with me, and they found no liability, and they let and so I was really excited that I'd beaten this guy, right? But my boss, who was sitting with me, said, "You realize that woman, she was actually hurt. So she was suing the state for monetary damages, and you made it so that she couldn't get anything. And is that really justice?" And I thought about hubris, essentially. I was so excited. I just wanted to beat that other lawyer that I wasn't really thinking about the justice
Big picture, right, at the end of the day.
and so that was a really big deal to me. And I left the AG's office, in 89 because my dad got sick. I thought I was going to go home to run a restaurant. But then my dad got well, and he wanted his restaurant back, thankfully, because I was not happy running a restaurant. But that's when I decided to run for state rep. That period of time from 89 to 90, I won the primary in March of 1990. I was the youngest guy they'd ever had. I was the first Latino or Mexicano or whatever that they'd ever had. And that was a huge learning experience for me. Some good, some bad. I was at a commissioner's court meeting in one of the counties when one of the county commissioners asked me if I could represent Anglos or if I was just going to represent Mexicans, and asked me if I was going to be more loyal to the government of Mexico than to the government of the United States. Those kinds of questions. A lady that came up to me after a dinner and told me that my people were good cooks. Those are the kinds of things that you just had to smile through and just. But again, you learn, right? And you learn what's out there. And then the legislative stuff, I learned how much of a difference that you could make, right? So I started paving highways, and I started building buildings, and I started doing all sorts of stuff that made a tremendous difference. I mean, now I can drive through Fort Stockton or Del Rio or Eagle Pass or Marfa or Van Horn or Fort Davis I mean, I can pick a community that I represented, and I'll see things that weren't there
Mm-hmm.
before that were my personal
Yeah.
projects. So those lessons about what you can do by asking questions and by if you don't. Again, if the legislature is supposed to be based on seniority and age and whatever, I just gotten there. I was, 28 or so.
Mm-hmm.
It just go out and do it, right? No tengas miedo. Just go out and do it. So, and then really getting married.
How did y'all meet?
We met at work. We met in the Attorney General's office. I was already a lawyer. Marilena was in law school, but she was assigned to clerk in our office, and it was amazing. It was amazing. Right away, you're not supposed to date at work, so we didn't tell anybody that we were dating. But it was great. But like every couple, I mean, when you're doing it, and then you make that decision, and then all of a sudden you're wondering, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? Is this going to be forever? How is this going to end?
Yeah. How do you know?
And now for us, we're going on. We just hit 35 years.
Wow! Congratulations.
So I think that's, and
Marriage is hard.
marriage is it takes effort. It takes effort. And then Nicolas came along, right? Nicolas was probably the moment in my life that I remember the most, because I was in the room when he was born. Actually, I caught him. I was the guy who cut the umbilical cord. I held him before anybody else did. And the first thing he did, I probably can't say on a podcast, but he relieved his bladder all over my chest. Was literally his first act as a new person. And but that moment of sheer joy and just sheer love, you have no idea. I understood in that moment that I would do whatever I had to do to make sure that little boy ate.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I really feel for a lot of these other people that are struggling with their kids. You just watch TV and what the U.S. is doing with children now, especially with migrant children.
Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult for me, because I remember that feeling of being just so in love with this little boy that I would do anything to make sure that he was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, my election to the legislature in 1990 and my election to Congress in 2012 were signal moments, but not as big as holding Nicolas the first time. Not as big as being with my family and having them watch me graduate from law school, or passing the bar exam and thinking, oh my God, I'm actually really a lawyer now. How scary is that? But there have been some moments in my life that I've really, I could have gone either way. I could have gone, I had a job offer with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they wanted me to come work for them, and I really wanted to work there, but they were so slow that I decided to run for the legislature. And then after I got elected, they said, oh, you can come now. And it was like, well, I can't. I just got elected to the legislature now. But I think what a different life I would have had if I had been in the U.S. Attorney's Office all that time and not a member of the legislature. So, Dios sabe lo que hace. I think God knows what He's doing.
Okay. What does the next 5 years look like for you?
I don't know that. I'm not a good planner. Nothing has ever worked out according to the plans that I've had. So I just put my faith in God, and I just tell Him to point me in the right direction. I'm on a couple of nonprofit boards that I really enjoy. Access to justice is a passion of mine, and kids are a passion of mine. So the Access to Justice Foundation that does civil legal services for the poor and other kinds of services. That's important to me. And I recently got on the board of the court-appointed special advocates, Texas CASA is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
So those are important to me. But I dabble in other things, and hopefully, I mean, really, my sole purpose right now is just to be a dad and to be a better husband.
Yeah.
So I'm
Nicolas
working
will
on
be
it.
graduated from UT here soon.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait. I know he will graduate, but I've told him, most people are sure, or they push their kids to be done in 4 years, and I'm one of those. I guess it's odd for me because I
Finished so fast.
finished so fast that I've told him, look, if you're on the 5-year plan or maybe the 6-year plan, it's not gonna bug me.
Yeah.
But if you're on the 10-year plan, it's going to bug me a lot. So you make sure you get your stuff done. So
Had to draw the line somewhere, right?
I look forward to sitting in the crowd and watching him cross the aisle and get a degree from UT.
Yeah.
But,
You'd be
he's a great Longhorn.
Be a Longhorn just like us.
He's a great Longhorn.
There you go. Are you promoting anything? You talked
No.
about CASA a little bit. You talked about
Yeah, well, those are the things that I'm passionate about. But I tend to be low key. I don't really get around enough to promote anything per se. I wish I could tell you that I probably should. I want to get involved in things that promote more. Let's call it civility in public discourse, right?
Mhm.
Treating people with respect. I would like to do that. I want to get back more involved in higher ed and either teach or do something along those lines again, just at least on a part-time basis. And I'm doing some of my own research on the history of West Texas and different things that have happened out there, some history of the legislature, different people that I knew and that are kind of heroes of mine. Irma Rangel of Kingsville comes to mind. Paul Moreno del Paso. They were the two longest serving Latinos in the legislature when I got there. I was a pallbearer for Irma Rangel's funeral, and people need to know their stories, and so I'm trying to find out more about them and do some writing so that people will know.
Yeah. Sharing the stories, and I asked some of these harder questions about death, and not things people want to think about or think about often, but a big purpose for me in starting the podcast was to sit down and just collect those thoughts and just hear them out into space.
I will tell you that I am one of those who I think of myself as being very lucky. I am, at an fairly young age in the legislature, I had an elementary school named for me in Eagle Pass, which was also a singular honor. There's the biggest building in Alpine at Sul Ross is named for me. A street at home. I mean, there's. I've been fortunate. I've been very lucky, and I'm very grateful for all of the opportunities. And the truth is that I guess if I'm promoting something, I guess I really want to promote the word opportunity, because I want to tell people that they can do it. Even today, even if it's hard, and there's a lot of difficulties ahead, but if you find people who are helpful to you, who will mentor you, who will teach you, if you find people who will support you and push you and pick you up when you're down, if you're look inside yourself and you see and you build courage and determination, then you're unstoppable. There's nothing that can slow you down. I think that's self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem. Those are in short supply, and I think that's part of the reason that people are so unhappy, and they blame other people for their problems. But really, we ourselves, we can fix it.
Right. Well, You've always been so generous with your time, generous with your
Thank you for having me,
experiences since the first time I met you. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share this space, talk about divine connections, talk about bridging the gap in generations, talking about purpose. And until the next time, hopefully I'll interview Nicolas soon. I don't know, we'll see. I'm sure he's got a lot to
I'm sure he can
say.
tell you some interesting stories.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.